Hi, and welcome to Experience Points by University XP. On Experience Points, we explore different ways can learn from games. I'm your host, Dave Eng from Gamespace Learning by University XP. Find out more by going to universityxp.com. On today's episode, we'll learn from Christopher Carbone. Christopher Carbone is an accomplished career services leader with over 2 decades of experience, known for pioneering innovative experiential educational programs. He collaborates with faculty and industry professionals, empowering diverse student populations towards success. With a decade of media experience in tabletop gaming, he co founded Board Game Academics, which is an academic journal. He also hosts and produces the Board Gamers Anonymous podcast. Christopher is currently a doctoral candidate working on his doctoral project focusing on tabletop role playing games as a clinical modality for mental health. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Happy to be here with you and all our friends out there.
Great. Thanks for being on the show again, Chris. I'm really glad to have you here. I want to jump into the very first question here, which I think is incredibly important, which is focusing on academic and gaming worlds. And I know juggling roles as an independent career development practitioner and co founder of Board Game Academics requires a pretty unique balance. So, my first question is, how do you find the harmony between your roles in academia and your passion for tabletop gaming?
Well, I think it's important to first start with what are the definitions of these. So, and in particular, why I mention this is because having been a career director for 20 years in different colleges and universities, both at the community college level and also at the university level,
Mhm.
when academics, even when they work on the campus, they typically don't know what a career center, career development center really does.
Yeah.
Typically, people from the outside and from the inside think, hey, you guys get students jobs. And in my last interview position that I worked, that was actually the question that was pitched to me that I had to put together in a slide presentation for the whole university to kind of prove that I had all of this knowledge and experience to help their students get jobs.
Mhm.
And my response to that was, of course, we do not help you get jobs.
Mhm.
And the stunned silence, of course, of everybody out there. And what I went on to clarify to say is in career development, just like human development, which was my
Mhm.
first doctorate, it's all about helping someone understand who they are within the world.
Mhm.
I can't make decisions for my student. I can't give them a job or force a job upon them, but I can help them discover who they are, what they might like or be interested, attracted to, engaged with in the world, because typically 99% of the time, they're already doing it in some manner in their own life at a lower
Mhm.
level, of course.
Mhm.
And then identifying those skills, abilities, and personality together, we can explore the world and the opportunities that might best fit them.
Right.
And then, along with developing resumes, cover letters, interviewing, social media, and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
now they're ready to look for the positions or the next stage of their graduate education that might benefit them best.
Right.
And then eventually, finally, of course, find them a job.
Mhm.
Now, on the other side, for Board Game Academics, it's
Mhm.
an academic journal with a unique perspective and a fantastic mission to engage our whole entire community, people out there in the public, academics out there in the field, and especially practitioners who are utilizing or hoping to utilizing tabletop games in a professional manner.
Mhm.
So it takes a very different take than the standards, but it is right down the line with everything else we've seen from research journals as
Mhm.
just being the high quality research from scholars out there in the field. And our job for Board Game Academics is to promote these wonderful scholars, researchers, and practitioners to the larger community. So hopefully elevate tabletop gaming to the next level.
Right.
Now, as you talked about the balance here,
Mhm.
I think as you heard, from my explanation of these two seemingly different areas, it's about beginning to recognize what is at the center of both of these things.
Mhm.
As I do with students, doing career development so long, it's all about me.
Mhm.
I am what brings balance to both of these worlds.
Mhm.
So whether it's the ivory tower or at the game table, my vocation to both
Mhm.
is to create a space with others that allows for a deeper exploration of ourselves and the world around us. Now, of course, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, because of what society deems as socially acceptable, this is where the real challenge comes in.
Mhm.
And trying to bring harmony to both really comes into stake. So, my colleagues in academia often bristle at the idea of tabletop gaming as a methodology
Mhm.
for learning or providing particular services to students.
Mhm.
By the same token, my colleagues at the game table bristle at the idea of tabletop gaming having these complex and deep meanings about life, about our shared history, and even, in fact, our need for social justice.
Mhm.
So, in order to balance both sides, my work has been to create a bridge in which both sides can benefit from each other,
Mhm.
bringing academics into tabletop gaming, bringing tabletop gamers into academia.
Mhm.
So, the harmony comes into place when I am proactive in bringing both worlds together. And no matter the challenges that come along with that,
Mhm.
by being proactive, by being part of the solution, by being a voice for others who do not have a voice,
Mhm.
and by that I mean to elevate their own voices and their own words, I find peace in that journey. So in the end, both of them, board game academics, the research academic journal,
Mhm.
and career development, they're both about experiential learning
Mhm.
and allowing us to make interesting decisions that help us reflect and grow about who we are and help grow the world around us.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I think that one of the things that really stood out to me was really the clarification of roles.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also worked in higher education administration and career development. Our career development office was also part of our student affairs administration, from which I was a part of. And I had that, a similar conversation that you indicated before, which was about, what is the role of career development as a whole? And, me and a lot of my other colleagues had the misrepresentation that it's about placement, it's about finding
Sure.
jobs. But I really appreciate you saying that it's more about trying to develop and I trying to identify who you are as a person and as an outcome or as like a relevant goal for that individual. It is the start of a career or continuance of a career or change of a career. But similarly, like what you brought up with games before, is that a lot of academics that you've talked to, a lot of other colleagues see gaming as really like a commercialized endeavor when there are really other purposes. Like we'll talk more about it in this interview, but the application of games for teaching and learning and other, I think, serious purposes is a very noble endeavor. And I'm glad that you were able to share that with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's a lot of old time ways in which thinking, like as you mentioned about placement centers.
Hmm.
Back in the day, the college population was very small,
Yeah.
very white male, very
Hmm.
upper social class.
Hmm.
So, of course, you could easily place them.
Hmm.
But as we've grown with our understanding about human development, whether it's Eric Erickson's stages of development
Hmm.
or existential phenomenology, talking about meaning and purpose in life and our experience within,
Hmm.
we know that developing the individual is the essential part, not finding a place. Or I used this quote or that I had found years ago. How does a bird know that the branch it lands on is going to be safe?
Hmm.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
All it can do is trust its wings.
Hmm.
And that's what I try to help for students or in gamers is help them develop themselves so that whatever they encounter in life, they're prepared.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I think you have a lot of great experiences and meaning to share. And I want to talk a little bit more about board game academics later. But I know that you're also a fellow podcaster, and I wanted to spend some time also talking about Board Gamers Anonymous, your podcast. So, talking about this podcast, can you share a memorable moment or episode that encapsulates the sense of both fun and learning that board gamers have at the table together?
Well, there's so many.
Mhm.
It's been 10 plus years, and you're asking me to pick my favorite child. Uh, they're all out there online. So
Right.
I absolutely welcome everyone to take advantage of listening to them, especially the old ones.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe not as good production wise, but nonetheless, those podcast episodes, as you mentioned, Dave, those are about our experiences around the tabletop table. And two things kind of stand out for me, I guess. One is something that didn't, in fact, happen at my own podcast. And that was an experience I had gaming, playing Five Tribes for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very popular game from Days of Wonder, from Bruno Cathala. And I remember sitting down, I was at a mall, it was at a meetup, and we're playing a game. And if you're a Euro game player, you understand that you sit down and then there's cubes and meeples, and that's all you need to know.
Right.
And as I was playing the game, one of the resources, one of the goods in which you can trade, for other goods or for other services or other monies was slave cards with a picture of an emaciated black brown man on the card. And I was just stunned and shocked that this was in a game with bright, colorful meeples and gins and very, whimsical, mythological kind of elements to it. And I was just stunned and taken back by that. And obviously, of course, there was someone at my table, a person of color as well. And I was like, this is just, it was haunting. It was a very haunting kind of experience that here I had cards in my hand and here was a valuable card, right? A very valuable card. It was a card in which it could be anything. It's the most valuable good. And I was literally being asked as part of the game mechanics to trade this person for goods and services. And it was one of the first times where a game just, took me back. We talked about it on the podcast, but really the place that the episode that really kind of just held me and shook me a little bit was we were part of the Dice Network. Many years ago, Tom Vassell had this wonderful network of all these different podcasts, and he had his flagship podcast, and he would ask all of us at the end of the year, reflect upon board games, and in these different categories, talk about what they liked and they didn't like, and, oh, I don't like the components, I don't like the artwork and stuff like this. And I took a chance, and I recorded my segment, and it was about Five Tribes, and I called out Days of Wonder and Bruno Cathala, in a sense, and I was concerned and worried, what the response was, because as we talked about on the podcast and as we talked about in the community, people are like, what's the big deal? It's not an issue and things like that. But of course, it was a reflection of society. And also, it was a game that was creating those elements in society on some small level.
Right.
And Tom was very welcoming. He let it be broadcast on the channel in support. And not shortly after, and I'm saying this, it was, I'm sure, in very, 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 very small part to us, they changed that. And I'm sure for Days of Wonder, and I'm sure for Bruno Cathala, this was just something that was overlooked. They were ignorant of it. And I don't think it was malicious in any way. But they changed that game element. And they even replaced the cards out if you wanted to. So as a podcaster, as someone who speaks into the void in hopes of something to change or benefit somebody, that was a very powerful moment for me to hear that on the podcast and then eventually see some change actually happen. Now, something connected to that would probably be our most recent charity event. We try to run a charity event every year, COVID notwithstanding. And recently, again, having played tabletop games for so long, we of course recognize the underrepresented, underserved, population of young women, especially in tabletop gaming. They were not at the conventions. They were not around the table. There was underrepresentation as far as game designers, publishers, and games about women in strong leading roles, especially women of color. So we wanted to champion and, again, raise their voices. Based on our privilege, we had an opportunity to lend them the space that was, theirs to begin with. It was deserving of them. And we put together an event that was all about the appreciation, love, and, exploration of women designers, gamers, and games that represented people who identify as women. And we said, well, who should we bring to this? Obviously, gamers will attend, and that's fine. And we worked with a fellow company, a nonprofit organization called Board Games for the Better.
Hmm.
We met them at Long Island Tabletop, where you and I met, Dave.
Yep.
Wonderful people who
Hmm.
go out, take tabletop gamings, and bring them to, again, repressed communities, communities that don't have the resources, lower socioeconomic class communities,
Hmm.
in order to kind of engage them with fun and joy and knowledge and experience.
Hmm.
Both of us together thought about it, and one of the groups that popped out into our head was a leadership group of young women,
Hmm.
Girl Scout Troop 6,000. Now,
Hmm.
this was a troop made up of young girls, leaders in their communities that were living in shelters throughout New York City.
Hmm.
So it wasn't one small group of young ladies, it was the combination of all within the New York City area that were in the shelter systems. And we invited them to come to the event to celebrate them, their accomplishments, their achievements, and to introduce them to the designers, publishers, artists, graphic designers,
Hmm.
media people, and wonderful games that celebrate their culture, history, and gender.
Hmm.
They and again, we did this out in Fanwood, New Jersey, could
Hmm.
not be more opposite than the
Hmm.
Bronx and Queens and everything
Hmm.
out there.
Hmm.
Um, Thankfully, they took us up on the opportunity to come out. They must have thought we were crazy. They didn't know who we were. They
Hmm.
came down to the event. We had so many young ladies and leaders there. And we got down to the table and we opened up Her Story, which is a
Hmm.
wonderful game about powerful female leaders throughout history and throughout the world, all backgrounds, all ethnic classes, everything that you can want, and all these wonderful leaders that in some cases have gone without the recognition. And the young ladies from the troop did not know what to expect of us. We weren't sure what to say to them or how we could help,
Hmm.
but we knew that sitting with them at the table, engaging in this positive, reflective, collaborative, beautiful game was something that would hopefully be meaningful. They loved the game.
Hmm.
They felt welcome and honored by the experience. And people were crying. We were crying.
Hmm.
Everybody was donating money left and right to the troop to
Hmm.
be able to support them on their future endeavors. They asked for us to come out there and serve more. Board Game for the Better continues to do events with them and with their community to help serve them. And it was an opening, it was an awakening for both of us
Hmm.
that because of social conditions and because of biases and such, we had become separated. And
Hmm.
at the table, we were able to come together and share something essential and meaningful and purposeful. And more importantly than anything, fun. It was
Hmm.
fun that connected us.
Hmm.
And through that fun, I think we made a bond and connection that we could not have made in any other way. Play. There's something about play.
Hmm.
There's something about being at the table together that's essential to our humanity more than our culture.
Hmm.
Play comes before culture. We know that. There's so many researchers have spoken about that. And that allowed us to bring some smiles to some faces. And as we reflect upon it on the podcast in the future, that's really what tabletop gaming is all about. And that's what Board Gamers Anonymous has always been about. Initially,
Hmm.
it started off with the fact that me and my co-host, Anthony Chatfield, who
Hmm.
is a teacher at Drexel University,
Hmm.
we felt ostracized. We felt anonymous because here we are, adult men
Hmm.
playing board games, right? And I remember one time coming back from a late board game night, it must have been 2 a.m., and I got stopped at a checkpoint on the way home by the police
Hmm.
because there was a local bar, strip club nearby. And I guess, of course, people were coming drunk.
Hmm.
And this female officer stopped me and said, "Where were you? What are you doing out here at this hour?"
Hmm.
And I was like, I didn't even know what to say at first. I was kind of crippled by my own kind of adherence to the social norms. I was like,
Hmm.
all right, I give up. I was playing tabletop games, playing board games at this, and I'm trying to explain Euro games and
Yeah, yeah.
meatballs and why I would be there until 2 in the morning,
Hmm.
and just the she was baffled.
Hmm.
Eventually, she did let me leave because, of course, no drinking, none of that kind of debauchery. I was doing,
Yep,
you don't
yep.
expect that at 2 in the morning.
Hmm.
But of course, then Board Gamers Anonymous kind of expanded. I mean, this was 10 plus years ago.
Hmm.
It's more welcoming, it's more opening to more people, it's more accepted in more venues than ever been before.
Hmm.
But we also wanted to be reviewers that could investigate and critique tabletop gaming, it's like we talked about with Five Tribes, in
Hmm.
order to make the industry better. We're not out here to hate, we're here out of love and devotion and
Hmm.
thanks for the tabletop industry. And we want to support their endeavors and
Hmm.
their growth, their development to be better. And I
Right.
think we saw a lot of that through Black Lives Matter. There was a lot of positive development in tabletop gaming. We see a reprint of Puerto Rico,
Hmm.
and I'm of Puerto Rican descent myself.
Hmm.
So, when I first played Puerto Rico, I was like, oh, this is a great Euro game. Oh, dear God. What are those cubes? Why are they on ships? I've seen this movie before. It doesn't end well for us.
Right.
And there has been that kind of thing. And we're really appreciative of the industry allowing us a voice and to be supportive and productive, but also to lend a critical eye to everything out there as well. And
Hmm.
also, of course, first and foremost, all of our listeners out there,
Hmm.
we want to create a space in which they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they felt heard, whatever their background happens to be, uh, neurodiverse.
Hmm.
We talk about a lot of gamers. We talk a lot about, different ethnic classes and welcoming to the table. But there's a lot of us out there who are challenged to
Hmm.
join social engagements at the table for many reasons,
Hmm.
social class, financial. Um, and we want to create that space for them. And we want to let them know as consumers as well, is this worth your money? As
Hmm.
games, when we started 11 years ago, an expensive game was $40.
Hmm.
Now it's $140.
Right.
And maybe you'll get it in 2 years. So
Yeah.
it's been a wonderful journey with my co-hosts and so many other people we've done along the way, and everyone who's listened and supports. So it's really been a blessed occasion for all of us.
Right. Wow, thanks, Chris. That's a really detailed background in history. I know about Board Games for the Better. I met
Yes.
them at Long Island Tabletop, same as you. They were also at Level Up in New Jersey.
Hmm.
So they're expanding. My nonprofit, Banditos Gaming, we also support Board Games for the Better. That's part of our mission. And
Absolutely.
I think that, you made some really great points. I did not know about the Five Tribes reprint because
Hmm.
I believe the first time I played Five Tribes was the reprint. But you also bring up some good points about the Puerto Rico reprint as well.
Yes.
And also, I think it was included in the Great Western Trail reprint because the original version, I believe, had the player like fighting, I believe, Native Americans or Native
Mm,
American tribes, but
sure.
now it's been reprinted as outlaws. So I feel like, a lot of
Yeah.
like a lot of the commentary on media that we consume on a regular basis puts you in a position to be able to, update and change and resolve some of these problematic issues with content. So, I applaud that, Chris. That's really great that you're able to share that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, we have more work to do. As you
Right.
mentioned, there's been so many new reprints and publishers and designers recognizing their cultural blind spots.
Hmm.
And we all have them. We all have them. And then on some cases, like, for example, the game Endeavor got a reprint,
Yep.
did not pull out the slavery component to it.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a great game, but I refuse to engage with a game in which if I don't enslave a people, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to do well in the game.
Hmm.
So we have more work to do, but we'll do it together.
Right. Right. Well, that brings me into the third and last question here because we talked about your background and also the gaming world. We talked about your podcast, but now I want to talk about board game academics. So I know that it focuses on scholarship and research into the role of modern tabletop board games. So I'd like to know, what are your aspirations for the future of this academic platform, and how do you see it contributing to the broader understanding of tabletop gaming in society and education?
I think first and foremost, when we talk about an academic journal, we're talking about a collection of wonderful and brilliant people that have come together to honor and support
Hmm.
the long hours and detailed research that scholars are doing out there in the field. And while, us in academia, we recognize our colleagues and we're supportive of them, but there are certainly elements and there are certainly people who tend to be gatekeepers,
Hmm.
especially when and how they think about themselves, in higher ed and academia. And again, we talk about the ivory tower. There are true elements to that.
Hmm.
We want to be the academic, peer reviewed, double blind journal that is there for scholars, researchers, and practitioners to get their work out there to benefit so many different populations that, have not had a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been able to do that. In fact, our first issue came out last week.
Mm-hmm.
Issue 1 is out, and we are so fortunate to have so many great writers on there, and so many great diverse different topics. So, and we have been encouraging our community in the podcast and the tabletop industry, please take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
There is brilliant perspectives on tabletop gaming that might enlighten your world about the things that you've been engaging with for all of these hours, offering a different perspective you never thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also, for the academic side, these tabletop games are text. They're an opportunity to have this hermeneutic experience
Mm-hmm.
where you engage with the text, or the game in this case, you're
Mm-hmm.
transformed by it and you come back with a different perspective. I remember
Mm-hmm.
playing Freedom the Underground Railroad my first time and looking at these, cubes,
Mm-hmm.
natural wood cubes on the table. And I'm like, why would I even care what happens to them? We're playing a co-op game. Oh, geez.
Mm-hmm.
Halfway through, I would give my, my pinky finger for one of these cubes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, they got to get safe. We got to get them to Canada. And
Mm-hmm.
it really did impact me and transform me. And I felt, as impacted as like watching Schindler's List. I
Mm-hmm.
felt that there was something meaningful being said here. And if I was going to participate in this, I was also being transformed by it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the academia kind of area, for professors out there,
Mm-hmm.
we want to let them know that there's a number of wonderful ways, and we have resources. We have practitioners out there who are utilizing games in their classrooms
Mm-hmm.
in ways that engage students that maybe do not typically engage with the typical Socratic method.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Practitioners, my background obviously is clinical psychology. We have practitioners in clinical psychology and board game academics as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us use tabletop gaming with our clients in group therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Our RPGs, tabletop role-playing game, giving people an opportunity to identify and try out new characters, new personalities, new social dynamics, seeing themselves in a radically different way because maybe they haven't been allowed because of their culture, religion, or social status to be able to explore elements of themselves. So for the clinical side, and then obviously the student service side,
Mm-hmm.
higher education is in a crisis right now. And we see this happening with a lot of small colleges, universities. They're disappearing
Mm-hmm.
because you can go online and get, I won't say an equal education, but you can get an education online.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you meaningfully do as a college administrator to bring students to the classroom, bring students to the campus? Well, what if you give them an in-person tabletop experience that's experiential, that's meaningful, purposeful, collaborative, right? Students come to college because they want to meet with other students of all different backgrounds and play with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the college experience. And as a career director, I want my students to have more experiential education. Internships are experiential education.
Mm-hmm.
Tabletop games are simulated experiential education.
Mm-hmm.
So the more experiences you can have with making those decisions that might be connected to a particular industry,
Mm-hmm.
all the better. I'm a psych major, philosophy major for way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing brass.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning everything about supply chain and logistics, and I'm just like, this is fun. And I would never, ever come close to entering a business classroom.
Right.
But brass did it for me. And it kind of opened my world to other aspects of myself that I never knew existed before.
Mm-hmm.
So Board Game Academics, our first issue's out. We're
Mm-hmm.
so proud about it. We want everyone to check it out. And we are also now, of course, doing our call for papers.
Mm-hmm.
So we want everyone to submit, and so that we have an opportunity to take a look at your work, support your work. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we do as an academic journal that might be slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
is we support the writers and the scholars in their research.
Mm-hmm.
We bring professionals to advise them, how to make their work better, help with editorial services,
Mm-hmm.
give them ideas, and so that they can grow,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can produce the best papers possible. And then we will be having another in-person uh, tabletop board game academics conference
Mm-hmm.
of all of the potential scholars who are going to be in the next issue. Now, last
Mm-hmm.
year we did at Gen Con Trade Day,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 12, I think it was 12 scholars who presented publicly and got some wonderful feedback. And then what we're looking at for this year, 2024, is we're going to be at Morristown, New Jersey at
Mm-hmm.
Dex Light.
Mm-hmm.
You might know Double Exposure.
Yep.
They do great work everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be there. And on the 4th of July,
Mm-hmm.
we are going to have a full day conference of academics to network, to strategize, game designers, scholars, practitioners learning how they can utilize tabletop games. And again, we want tabletop gaming to be an opportunity to open a space and to help others develop skills, but also get to know who they are, get to know who the others are around them.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, we find so often we are othered from
Yeah.
each other because of
Mm-hmm.
social conditions or a number of different, unfortunate, problematic behaviors and underlying dynamics. Tabletop gaming, playing a game with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
levels the playing ground. We are one and the same. We start with the same resources, we're cooperating together,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a lot of fun. And
Right.
we want tabletop gaming. And I'll tell you this too,
Mm-hmm.
from a career development perspective, for 20 years in the field, talking with employers,
Mm-hmm.
theoretic theoretical knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
valuable,
Mm-hmm.
super valuable, but experiential education will win the day.
Right.
You have to know how to employ what you learned from the theoretical aspects. That's essential, and that's what tabletop gaming could do for society at large, because society bleeds into the games
Mm-hmm.
and games bleed into society, and it's an artifact of who we were and also who we could be
Mm-hmm.
aspirationally.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to link to that first publication of Board Game Academics. And I really just applaud your work in being able to make a lot of this content and context accessible for the greater community. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks for joining us today, Chris. We appreciate it. Where can people go out to find more about you?
Well, pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
Boardgameacademics.com has all of our links for our academic content.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking for the podcast, boardgamersanonymous.com, you can find everything for our podcast, everything for our events. And they're both are one and the same, so they kind of cross over in some respects.
Great. Thank you. I'll make sure to include all those links in the references or show notes for this episode. Chris, thank you again for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you everyone for listening.
I hope you found this episode useful. If you'd like to learn more, then a great place to start is with my free course on gamification. You can sign up for it at universityxp.com/gamification. You can also get a full transcript of this episode, including links to references in the description or show notes. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'm your host, Dave Eng from Game-Based Learning by University XP. On Experience Points, we explore different ways we can learn from games. So if you like this episode, please consider commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Subscribing is absolutely free and ensures that you'll get the next episode of Experience Points delivered directly to you. I'd also love it if you took some time to rate the show. We live to lift others with learning, so if you found this episode useful, consider sharing it with someone who could also benefit. Also, make sure to visit University XP online at universityxp.com. University XP is also on Twitter, otherwise known as X, at university_XP, and on Facebook and LinkedIn as University XP. Also, feel free to email me anytime. My email address is dave@universityxp.com. Game on.